All right. Good. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? This is the Morbid Symptoms podcast, and I'm very excited to welcome back Laura Jones and Elenor Hutson um, from beautiful Scotland. How are you ladies doing tonight?
Oh, we're good. So pretty good.
Hello, very well, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Very good. All right. So, um, I've been after them to come back on and tell us about their time at Living Rent and Living Rent. Oh, well, I'll let. No, what I should do first. Sorry, I'm. I should introduce you guys properly here. Did I? Oh yeah. So Laura Jones is. You can see that she's been a long time campaigner for housing and the homeless, and also for Scottish independence. And we're going to learn tonight why she's called why her ex handle is former decent. We're going to get to the bottom of that. Um, and we're joined also by Eleanor, who's
Hello.
hi, and she's one of these lucky these amazing people who is not on X, as far as I know.
No, I'm really not.
Here's this lovely picture of her, and she's also been involved in community organizing and the housing and homeless campaign and Scottish independence. And the first time that Eleanor was on the show was with her husband, who was running for MP of Glasgow North, I believe, for the Alba Party.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry. That's my dog.
it's okay, no problem. No, dogs, kids, all good. We roll with it. um, and unfortunately, the Nick's campaign wasn't an electoral success. Although I think that he really got. I mean, I'm sure he was quite the um uh what do I want to call it? Because I say politician and people have a negative connotation, but politician in the positive sense of the word, man of the people.
Yeah.
So I think if he wants to run again, he would have much success. Like I said, I
He's in
was,
it for the long game. He's
yeah, yeah.
it's just a setback.
Anyway, yeah, well, yeah.
His
So,
eventual rise to
um,
power.
yes. So the first thing we're going to talk about tonight is I wanted to have the ladies on to hear what happened at Living Rent. Um, and all I know is that I think it was a couple of years ago, there was a kerfuffle because they were Eleanor and Laura and a group of other people who didn't go along with all the gender identity ideology were smeared and purged, my word, from not that it's funny, but I mean, it kind of sounds funny when you say purged. I didn't, anyway, but this is where we are. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you if you want to tell us a story of how it came to be, how you came to be now in quotes, formerly decent socialist, um, in terms of what happened at Living Rent.
Oh my God, where to start?
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Shall we start by just saying like what living rent is?
Yeah. Why don't you explain what living
Okay,
rent
right.
is, or what it was
So
supposed to
what it was
be?
supposed to be. So
Oh, and I should say that I did manage to go to their website
mm,
and get this, and it sounds like a fantastic organization.
yeah, we thought it
Um,
was going to be.
yeah, so this is their logo, Living Rent, and they have a website. And yeah, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Right. Okay. So, Living Rent is a tenants union in Scotland. I think that it's fair to say that it mostly does tenants in the private sector, and it's built a name for itself by taking on sort of individual pieces of casework where somebody has perhaps not perhaps a letting agent has been taking fees that they're not allowed to take by law, or perhaps they didn't give them their tenancy deposit back at the end of the tenancy, and they made a little name for themselves by having a group of people sort of rock up, do a demonstration outside outside the agency and win back the money, and everyone's happy. So a nice little militant tenants union. Didn't really do a huge amount with social tenants on housing schemes, but when it was set up, we were living on a housing where we still live in the Wynford, and we had a little residents association where we lived, and we wanted to kind of affiliate it with something larger, because we were getting a bit of pushback from the landlord, and we just thought we'd benefit from being part of a bigger organisation, and it was massively to Living Rent's advantage to have us join, because they mostly had young middle class people. The culture was very middle class. They would not have been able to walk onto a housing scheme and organise it for themselves, and we were giving them a branch on a scheme on a plate, really. And so it seemed like it was going to be like kind of like mutually beneficial situation to join them. At that time, I'd been a Terf for some time.
Yes, we'll out ourselves now. All three of us would define woman as adult human female.
Yes,
and
yes.
Are quite are not confused about the fact that there's only males and females, and you can't actually switch from one to the other. And in many cases, and it's not a good idea to pretend like that's not the case.
No. So
other than that, live and let live.
Nah, exactly. I've been a Terf for some time, and that exactly as you say, Tara, believing those things. And obviously, I was aware that that is not a popular position to take on the left, particularly the part of the left that I was part of, a really sort of activist-y sort of left. And so I was aware that that wasn't a popular position to take. And I'd been like somewhat uncomfortable on the left for a little while. But I also thought, like, the people that have set up Living Rent, they are relatively sensible as far as that part of the left goes. They are at least attempting to do something practical on the ground. And it's the nature of a union of any sort, whether it's in a community or in the workplace, that you are attempting to encompass everybody. So I would expect that if you're running a union, you don't really care what people's political opinions are. You're not asking them to sign up to everything you believe in. You're just asking them to sign up to the idea that we're in favour of tenants, and we stand up for tenants' rights, and we work together. Because you
whatever
can't have a union,
whatever the union is being organized around, the other stuff would be kind of extraneous.
That's I mean, you can't run it. You can't run it any other way. If you run it any other way, it isn't a union. It's a leftist sect. You cannot have entry to a union based on whether you agree with like all the current leftist thinking. You have to take everybody. So I thought that we'd be relatively safe and comfortable within that structure. And how wrong? How wrong can you get?
Well, we might have been, though. That's the thing.
Yeah.
So how did it happen then that this became an issue, that you being language is so crazy, biological realist, because I'm trying to be I'm trying to be somewhat sensitive, but yeah. So how did it come up? How did it even become to be an issue?
So for Nick, it had actually started earlier, because Nick was quite outspoken about it on his Facebook about his Terfy views. Nothing offensive, just the normal arguments.
What used to be,
but maybe before a lot of us were brave enough to say them publicly, and also he always had like thousands of followers on Facebook, so it was like his stuff got seen. So they knew he had untoward views about gender, and there was a campaign early on in our affiliation to Living Rent there was a campaign that was mostly led by Nick, again round the corner from us, where there's a big hill of land where they demolished social housing about 15 years ago, and they never built anything, and private developers wanted it to build private rental stuff on, and there was a big campaign to stop them from doing it, a campaign which Living Rent had actually basically decided to give up on, just before it was basically successful, because the council announced that that land now can't be sold off to private developers. Nothing's been built on it still, but the argument that we want to keep pushing for is build social housing.
Yeah,
there,
if you demolish social housing, they owe us more social housing. They should build some more for us.
Yeah. So Nick had been the main one sort of pushing this campaign, but he garnered support, and there were people, Living Rent members, in the area, or in the West End, which is like, we're kind of in the West End, but the Wynford isn't like considered the West End because it's not fancy. But so anyway, a lot of young Green Party members in the West End kind of hung around that campaign, and a neighbour of ours who had just a pure ego clash with Nick, as far as I can see, a young man who fancied himself a really good activist, and thought that Nick should move over or something, I don't know, decided to start doing a character assassination of Nick, and started going around telling everyone, this guy's a Terf, you shouldn't be working with him or dealing with him, he's a horrible Terf. So that was the first that he'd had of it. And they started a little campaign where they put in grievances and complaints against him to the Living Rent exec. And so then he had to go through some grievance procedures, which he obviously had to have a union rep there for. This was his livelihood at the time.
Yeah, because he'd got a job with them, and so so that was the first thing, was that they went for him in his job, and then there was
So Nick was working for Living Rent, or he was working.
Nick got a job working for Living Rent.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And so there was this, I don't want to say, anyway, this young man who took issue with Nick for whatever reason, and he decided to go after him for his
I think there was
untoward view that sex is real.
Yeah, well, he was an anarchist, and he had a really kind of strange kind of sort of purist anarchist position that nobody should be having a job in Living Rent, or that that would, because that would form a layer of bureaucracy, which is kind of hilarious thinking about it, because it was such a tiny organization, there was no layer of bureaucracy, it was just a silliness. But I think you're right, Laura, is what it came down to, is that he would like to have had more influence in the branch than he had.
I mean, it always seemed like a very dick swinging kind of stuff to me, to be honest. Because if it's not, then you address it directly and you speak to people directly. Do you know what I mean? You do it out in the open. Whereas the way he went about it, and also for anarchist, whatever that means, but to be going after somebody's job, somebody with a young family, for that to be your first course of action already, there you're like, what kind of working class solidarity are these people espousing?
Not only did Nick have a young family, but because my son has autism and school wasn't working out for him, I'd given up my job to homeschool him. So Nick, which he knew because
this is a neighbor of ours. Again, this is somebody who lived across the street from us.
Well, he sounds lovely. I'm thinking that. No. It's okay. So I guess not all the Scottish are lovely.
We've got some
we've got some stories,
special people. So that's where it started for him. But obviously I think Elenor just got tired with that brush. Not that obviously Elenor has her own views that she can be criticized for or whatever, but a lot of it was, it was kind of,
Elenor, we know you're a trad wife. We know you're a trad wife, just standing by your man, no matter what.
Obviously she just
oh my god, I'm like the left-wing equivalent of a trad wife. I'm like Jenny Marks here. I'm like, darling, is there anything you'd like me to translate from the German for you?
I mean, I want to be clear. I have no problem with the trad wife. I'm just I was like, anyway. Okay, so this guy, but apparently there was this worked though, so he was able to get other people to be upset about your guys's position on gender?
Well, despite the exec of Living Rent trying to bend over backwards to appease these people and putting Nick through all these stressful grievance procedures that, as I said, he needed to have a union rep along for, who was our chair at the time, great guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, there nothing came of it because it was completely
Because it was
unsubstantiated.
nonsense. It was complete
Yeah.
nonsense. So they had
Mhm.
like I think that he initially said, "Well, look, I'll shut down my Facebook page if it's causing difficulties," which is more than he should have done, really, because you
Yeah.
have every right to express your personal opinions on your personal Facebook. But he said, "Oh, I'll shut down my Facebook page. That's okay." And they were like, they ran the disciplinary procedure. They didn't really find anything. They couldn't do much about it. They were like, "Okay, fine, come back to work, get rid of your Facebook." And then the trans activists went nuts. They went nuts because they're just not used to not being able to get people sacked.
Yeah.
And so they just stepped it up, and they were just constantly like, I think they had like well,
Was this
all
with,
the
was
social
this with,
media just went
were these
mad.
were these trans activists, were these within Living Rent, or were they
Right,
kind of
yeah,
like
okay. So there was like, there's a
freelancers?
little, right, so there's a bunch of stuff going on. So it, and right now I probably couldn't say with like too much accuracy how it happened, because I wasn't like on the inside,
No, for
obviously, of
sure.
like
Yeah, yeah.
their
This is just
internal
this is from
machinations.
Eleanor's lived experience. Okay.
But you've got to,
And
like, I mean,
we know the
I
rules.
used,
You can't
yeah,
challenge
yeah.
somebody's lived experience. So
I mean, I
you
used
tell
to,
us.
I used to be like, before I sort of became more of a turf, I was on the edges of those kinds of crowds and seeing what they do. So I can guess at how they organised it, because I remember like being party to online conversations where somebody would say, "Oh, you go on and do a bit of concern trolling and say, oh, we're just a bit concerned, and then I'll come in with that, and then we'll all write to their employer," and so I know I can sort of guess how it would have gone down. But from the outside looking in, there was like there's this one guy that lived on our scheme that had fallen out with Nick, and he did like quite a lot of kind of like sneaking around and like grumbling to other members of the immediate branch. And then it seems like either he got more trans activists involved, or they got wind of it somehow and stepped it up a notch. So there was like a sort of initial wave where it appeared to be just arguments within the branch which could be contained. And then after that, all of a sudden, people we had never heard of or met before were sort of quite aggressively organising against us. And that was like the second part. And in fairness to the first guy, he always claimed that he was against targeting us as individuals and preferred to do it through the proper channels. But I don't know if that's the case or not, or if it was all kind of coordinated behind the scenes, and I don't think we will ever know that. There was at least one person I don't think is a real person.
Yeah, I think there were like 3 different types. So there were like people that were members that assumed no smoke without fire, these people must be horrible bigots. There were people that weren't members but either knew about it because they were online, or they had mates that were members, because Living Rent was kind of a trendy, newish thing.
Kind of scene thing.
Yeah, so it was a young activisty lefty people would be kind of moving in those circles, and like, so a little scandal about transphobia within that group would be just interesting to them, and they might just jump on it for fun, because there were some
yeah, and it's group building for them. They go after somebody, and then it just kind of solidifies their we know how that can, the glue that binds can be a variety of types. Yeah. So eventually then, so after the second wave, did you guys just decide, okay, enough, or did Living Rent
well
get involved again?
To go back a bit, so I think what happened was you had this situation, so you had some people that were genuinely concerned or whatever. You had people that were jumping on the bandwagon,
Mhm.
But I think you had also like a huge part of this is that Nick, as part of Living Rent, or basically Nick and the few campaigners in this area had just prevented one multi-million-pound land deal, and we were eyeing up Wheatley's next project, which was the
Okay.
demolition in the Wynford on our estate, which is again
Mhm.
£100 million, or it went up from like 76 million. Now it's 100 million they're
a lot
spending
of
on
money
this
involved.
huge regeneration project. And
Are
we
you
were threatened.
suggesting that Wheatley, this behemoth in real estate, would weaponize identity politics
It's
for
free.
purposes of a
It's
real
Yes.
free,
estate
right?
deal?
I mean, why
Uh,
wouldn't you?
Yeah,
I
I mean,
It costs
mean,
nothing.
there's I think there's something in this. I've been an activist a long time, and
Mhm.
I've been in some movements that have been quite heavily infiltrated. I've had the experience of
Mm.
5 of my comrades turning out
Mhm.
to be police. And
Oh,
another,
God.
and so there's the state obviously
Mhm.
does that, but there's like quite a thriving little kind of industry of um, undercover kind of like almost like a sort of like private industrial espionage companies that specialize in messing with activists. And I
I
know
wonder what
some.
fancy name they have. I wonder if it's like, because I'm trying to think just based on movies, like there'd be have like if you'd have, I don't know, be like a public, like some sort of covert op of like their public relations unit or
I
something.
think they just style themselves as consultants, just
Yeah, just
consultants.
like, just kind of
Yeah,
like wink, wink. We need someone to,
yeah,
we need some
yeah,
community outreach over there.
yeah.
And
But I mean the one that's
oh my goodness.
the
I
one
mean, it's not
that's
funny when it
no, no.
happens
I
to
mean,
you, but
the
it's
one that's
just,
confirmed and public knowledge is that BAE Systems, who's an arms manufacturer, um,
mhm.
did pay somebody to be undercover full time in the campaign against the arms trade in the UK. And I don't know
Okay.
that guy personally, but I know people who thought that he was their friend and knew him for a long time. So it's certainly a thing that goes on. You never find out these things until like 10, 20, 30 years down the line. But it
No,
would not
no.
surprise me even a little bit if something like
Mm-mm.
that was happening. And I'm sure that, I mean, it's very hard because this ideology just rolls over people, and the left is like perfectly
Mhm.
capable of tearing itself to pieces without any
Yeah,
outside assistance.
yeah.
But
Well,
I'd
no, I
be
mean,
very
I can see,
surprised
especially,
if these guys weren't
yeah.
capitalizing on it to some degree, because we were winning, we were stopping them doing stuff that they wanted to do.
Mhm,
There was a lot of money involved,
mhm,
and then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
yeah,
And the most
yeah.
vicious people that came after us were not members of Living Rent, I don't think. The
Mhm,
people that posted the worst comments and that were the most
so it
insistent
was,
about all of this list of names having to lose their jobs or their positions or be kicked out of the organization
mhm.
were a woman that maybe is a member, that seems to exist and be a member, but it's a
I think
young
she's a
person,
real
not heavily
person.
involved
Yeah,
anyway, and a guy that does not seem to exist at all, that we've never been able to identify in 2 years. Other than that, it was just the exact kind of freaking out and going, oh, well, we don't want to look like transphobes, so we'll agree with these
yeah. The
random
thing that
posts
really
on
did
Facebook.
it
Mm.
for us was this guy, Brian, who sort of showed up, and he did a Facebook post just
Mhm,
kind of like monstering us and encouraging everybody and anybody to put in like as many complaints to Living Rent as possible.
mhm.
And the complaints were simply that we were still in the union. So
Yeah.
it's like,
Why are these people still here? These evil
yeah,
people.
and
Yeah.
by then it had gone.
Mhm,
To me, by
mhm,
then it had gone beyond Nick. It wasn't
mhm.
just sack Nick. It was like sack Nick, and chuck out everybody
Yeah.
associated with Nick, which by then was me and
Yeah.
you and other
Mhm,
people, and
mhm,
it was awful for everybody.
Well,
Really awful for
mhm.
everybody.
to
Well, I
backtrack,
think I think this
sorry.
seems like what we've heard before is that, especially with the online aspect, that it's easy for organizations to get overwhelmed and freak out, and then who pays the cost for
Yeah,
that, of course, is the people the people like you who get axed
yeah,
out or smeared or whatever, because they panic and they don't want to, the easiest thing for them, of course, is to get rid of the people who are attracting the negative attention. But then you say, like, who knows, some of these people couldn't be real, or it's just like
Yeah.
You know, you
Yeah.
could have if you don't have a system that can, isolate like if the complaints are coming from the same thing or not.
I
But
don't think Brian was real. I think that was a if he
yeah,
was,
I mean that's
and
and what a
you know,
nightmare. And then you have this Wheatley thing, and for people who don't know, they're a large I know this from you guys, that they're a large real estate corporation firm, whatever,
yeah. I
in
mean, they're
Scotland, and so
ostensibly,
they'd be interested in undermining your guys' group because you'd had success
yeah,
blocking their
yeah. And in fact,
couple of
Nick
their
went
deals.
into a meeting with one of their managers like quite soon after that. It was like just a personal, just representing one of our members. I think it was like my damp or repairs or just just everyday run of the mill sort of thing. Walked into the meeting, and one of the managers from Wheatley Group looked really surprised and went, "Oh, you're still around then?" Like that. So.
Yeah, I mean, and
About
it's
what
not
you
a
were.
large place, so I'm sure. Yeah, who knows? I mean,
Mm.
yeah, I mean, it sounds,
Mhm.
plausible. It wouldn't surprise me.
Our
It's
little our little residents union has about 1,000 followers on Facebook, and so neighbors will go on there to hear what we're saying about the regeneration plans or what news we have. We've had about at least 2 guys that have just been Wheatley moles on that page. They have names like John Smith or Bill Jones, and the only thing they follow is us, and the only thing they do is they come on to comment,
Complain about things and
but
comment.
generally to try to sow disunity within our
Yeah,
community.
just complain.
Always to say, oh, these troublemakers want to put asylum seekers in the flats, or these guys are lying to scaremonger about blah blah blah. So it's
There was-
always this, it's the same.
Yeah.
It's clearly why would you not? Why would you not?
There was one,
Yeah.
wasn't there, who claimed to be a trainee social worker, and I remember him coming on. He came on with like disinformation that he sort of ostensibly knew because of his training, and like one of them was like that you wouldn't be able to get housing benefit to cover the rent in the high flats because it was like against the law to give housing benefit for like flats that weren't up to a certain standard, and it's nonsense because I have a background in welfare benefits law. I know that's not the case, and then I was like helping some of the homeowners with the like very high bills that they were getting, and he came on saying like this is outrageous that this kind of uneducated person is making up law and preying on vulnerable people, and was not making up the law. And I argued the case with him. I was like, look, this is the regulations I'm relying on, this is real law, blah blah blah. He kind of like went quiet about that, and then he went, oh, and she's a Terf. And I was like, oh well, the mask slipped a little bit, because if you were just an ordinary guy and you live on a scheme and you just happen to be doing a course to train to be a social worker, why are you up to date with that controversy in particular? Because there always was like very much a kind of like a distance between the membership and supporters on the scheme and the wider living rent. It was, if we'd have stayed in there, that would probably be a dynamic that we'd still be contending with now. Because so it would have been vanishingly unusual for somebody to know all about the goings on the Wyford, and also all about the like wider controversies in the union, unless he was like an activist that was part of it. Because we had and even then we had activists on the scheme that were like absolute stalwarts who were like going out and doing stuff all the time, who suddenly got attacked for being Terfs or being Terf adjacent or having been on the internet standing next to Nick in a photograph. Suddenly got this like, for some people, right, that attacks that came from the wider organisation were their first contact with the wider organisation. Like like it was it was madness. It was so just the fact that he knew both sides of the controversy, I was like, no, you're not real.
Yeah, it's crazy when you hear from a personal stories about how this gets weaponized. It's just like, and how random, because you're having a conversation about the housing thing, and then all of a sudden someone's calling you. Be like, what?
Do you remember the boyfriend that you had at the time?
And
he was like,
okay, that seems random.
And he just used to say like, what's that got to do with houses?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, like, what? Are we?
Do with houses? Like, I wanted that on a t-shirt. Like, what's that got to do with
what does that do with housing? Yeah. Oh my god. So how did
Oh.
it so how did this end then? Did you
Well, can I just mention Sarah Finley? Because there was a
Sure.
woman who had recently been elected at their AGM to the board, and so she was like mid-50s, mid-late 50s, has grandchildren, lots of animals to look out for, limited household income, but years and years and years of experience as a community activist, and had just
She'd been on
decided
the
to
board
commit
of
herself.
charities before. She had
Yeah,
like
like
enormous,
really.
like fantastic governance experience of like
Mhm.
of charities and activist groups and things. And we had recruited her and put her on the board.
Mhm.
And she's a social housing tenant.
Ticked all the boxes, and she got absolutely monstered.
Yeah.
To the extent that I think it was her son just said to her, persuaded her to stand down, and went like, "Look, mummy, you know, I'm worried about you. I don't think you're safe."
Yeah,
Mhm.
so she, prior to this mysterious figure, Brian, posting publicly on Facebook, there had been an accusation on another Facebook. No, it's the same Facebook page, sorry. Or was it on the Slack? Maybe it was on the Slack
Could have been.
channel.
It was
Anyway,
probably on the
so
Slack.
it was on the Slack channel, I think, with all
Mhm.
the living rent people. And
Mhm.
someone had said something quite unspecific, like, "Oh, I've heard there are Terfs in this organization, and that's a terrible thing," something like that. And Sarah Finley had gone on that thread, right? And the way she described it, she remembered like shaking while she was trying to think of the wording for how she was going to express her disapproval at this. And she
Mhm.
thought very carefully about how to word it and stuff.
Mhm.
It was such
And the
reasonable
way
things
it
she
was worded,
wrote.
yeah. So what she wrote is, it was like, as a tenant, I am damn sure I'm going to continue to stand up for tenants' rights. It's the reason that I give some of my meager income to the project and spend time on it every month.
Mhm.
As a woman, I'm damn sure. Well, sure, I'm going to continue to. Was it to something?
To stand up for
It was
women.
the loss of my
Yeah.
sex-based rights.
Yeah,
To
yeah.
stand against that. I will also always continue to be civil and respectful with
Mhm.
those who have a difference of opinion. I feel like that's an important part of activism. And then she says something like, I've learned over years of activism that it's important to focus on the issue at hand,
Mhm.
that you can't prove everyone, and that once cracks in the line appear, they will be exploited by whoever is on the opposing line.
Mhm.
And it's like,
Did
it's
that
almost
turn out to be
like,
true?
it's like the very statement that she
Mhm.
got expelled for is the warning, for
Yeah.
what this leads to. So after that, that's when this Brian guy came over and was like, right, here's the list. All of these people have been identified and all of them must be immediately expelled. But worse than
Jesus.
that is she's already been called a turf piece of shit, a cunt, all this horrible language. That post that was saying that we should all be expelled for being terrible bigots,
Mhm.
full of this horrible
The
misogynistic
language
sweary
was
language, like
awful.
Mhm.
unbelievable.
Mhm.
So obviously we put in complaints to Living Rent at
Mhm.
that point. Well,
We
we
still got
called the
letters at that
police.
point, yeah. Well,
At
yeah,
the
we
time,
did
we
call
were
the police.
scared.
Nick
Jeez. Yeah.
Nick had to call the police because he had been he hmm, he was on the way to being being pushed out of the organisation.
Mhm.
And in order to make a case for constructive dismissal,
Mm.
his union rep advised him, look, if like threats have been made against you and the organisation's allowed it, you need to make a police report. So he had to do, and you did one because they'd been sharing around a picture of Laura standing outside her house, and the way
Jeez.
that the picture was, you could tell which, I think it had the door number was like visible in the
Oh my
picture.
And it's
God.
on our
This
residence
is
union.
insane.
Yeah,
It's
it's
so
on our
insane.
residence union
It makes me
page.
think there has to be money behind it because I mean I guess maybe not because I guess we've seen some really radical trans activists who just once they set their crosshairs on some group or person they just go. So I guess that's possible, but it just seems so crazy
It
that
was very much
very
directed
bl-
at
yeah
everyone that was interested in social tenants.
yeah
That they were the only ones targeted. You know
yeah.
what I mean?
Mhm.
I remember
And
like
this idea, I mean, it's so this idea that there's that this was such an issue that would work, that everyone's so aghast. Like, the worst thing you
mm,
could possibly say is that a woman is a adult human or something.
So stupid.
That's
So
enough
stupid.
to get on some sort of, well, it's an American reference, but some sort of, Red Scare McCarthyite
Well, it is.
list, and you have to
It's
totally just be, and then like everything is. I mean, my God,
it's a
it's
form of
it must have been
left
just
wing McCarthyism.
amazing.
I think it's a form of left wing McCarthyism, and it has the same dynamic because you have the same sort of thing where like people were told, weren't they, that they would be perhaps like invited back into the fold if they would like denounce us and stuff like that. And I remember people being denounced, not even for not denouncing us, but for not denouncing us fast enough.
Oh,
I remember
yeah.
that. And there was like this sense that you're like contaminating everyone around you. And
Yeah,
like,
you have to get rid of
yeah,
the
yeah,
tainted
yeah,
connection, or
yeah.
or if someone hasn't said something. Yeah, no, it's very cultural revolution in the worst possible sense. It's just,
Yeah,
and then we've seen
that
that even if
happened.
you do, the people who do capitulate or do try to backtrack, usually it's never enough. They still have
I
to.
remember saying
They
to them
still
at the
want
time that,
the head on the spike.
yeah, I remember saying to them at the time, like, you can do this. You can, it would be really easy for you to just expel us. But what you have to contend with is what happens like the next time these guys decide they'd like you to sack somebody. Like, are you
Yeah,
going
you
to
set a
continue to do
precedence.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Are you going to
Mhm.
continue just to have just like a purge every
Mhm.
time somebody gets upset with somebody else? Do you want to go down that road? And
Mhm.
like, didn't have an answer for it. They're very sheepish.
Oh, they were awful.
Well,
We
they
had
don't
to.
know, or I mean, I can put myself. I mean, yeah, I'm not excusing it at all. I mean, come on, people, but I can understand, like, if you hadn't had this kind of thing before, and
Mm,
they just want it to go away, and I mean, but I know that I don't know who it was. I think it might have been Helen Joyce,
mm,
who said something, because she was giving an interview, and someone asked, like, well, how is it that you avoided being, why didn't the Economist fire you? And she was saying that she was lucky that when word got out about her book right before publishing and right afterwards, that apparently there was some concerted effort to get the Economist to disavow her or
mm.
and she said her boss was just like, yeah, no.
No,
you know
I, I,
and she made a good point, and I think it's just exactly it's that once they if they get the feeling that there's wiggle room, then they're going to keep
yeah,
on going, like
then
what your friend said,
yeah,
there's cracks there.
yeah,
So
yeah.
or if they issue some sort of halfway statement, like
Mm,
like academics always do, like, well, of course we support
mm,
academic freedom, but we don't agree with so and so's views and this and that, and
mm,
trans women, et cetera, et cetera. But we also any kind of weakness like that, then you're just going to
mm,
then they're just going to get more vociferous, and then if you cave,
yeah,
and yeah,
yeah.
easier said than done, it makes it harder for the next person. But I was just like, yeah, it just makes sense that if you have who knows, it could be
Well, they
different
lost.
situations, but just not even to wait to see if it passes by or not.
No,
Just
and that's
stand
the
by your people. I mean,
yeah. I mean, at the time this was going on, the trans rights activists had to had to go at purging this guy Mike Daly, who's a very sort of prominent like housing lawyer,
mm,
because he'd said some turfy things online, and so they wrote to his employer, Govern Law Centre,
mhm,
and said like, "Oh, we want to make complaints about your solicitor who said turfy things online," and they just got like a nice letter back from Gandhi Walker, who is the supervising solicitor
mm,
of that place, and it just read, "No, we don't have an internal complaints procedure that covers things that our employees say online
mhm,
because that would be breaching their human rights."
mhm.
And then there we go. That's all you need to do. Just shut
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
down. Like before
Mhm,
you panic and start sacking people,
mhm,
I just have a
mhm.
little think. Am I
Yeah.
being asked to do something
Yeah.
reasonable?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's not
Mhm,
difficult.
mhm,
It's not difficult. But they
Yeah.
absolutely they were frightened,
mhm,
weren't they? They absolutely freaked out.
mhm,
And again, that's like one of Scotland's foremost homelessness campaigners, and prior to that, one of Scotland's foremost land reform
Hmm.
campaigners, targeted for the same reason.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like it's a mixture, isn't it? It's like, but there's potentially like interest involved behind the scenes, like almost certainly like a little prod and a little stir, but it's also just a basic like just I don't know, like what you would even call it, like a kind of like a morbid symptom
Well,
of
yeah.
these
Well,
of
yeah,
these
for sure.
people. But
But this is, I mean,
yeah.
it started with before, or maybe it all, I can't remember anymore how it all blew up, but it became to be the thing that labeling someone a racist.
I
And then it
remember that.
became a
Yeah.
transphobe, which also gets limited to, and if you're a transphobe, then you're also all the other stuff as well. That somehow includes everything. But the idea that these terms that used to at least I thought, from what I recall, be used more selectively for actual and and actual instances of it, and it's just like it just gets used to shut down debate and to power over people by suggesting that they're racist or sexist or homophobic or transphobic, which of course, I mean, these things exist, but it's like,
Yeah,
and
sure.
then
I
the
mean,
people that go out of their way, like, oh my God, and especially if we're on the center of the left, the worst thing, nobody wants that taint or to be next to that taint. And everybody
yeah.
feels like they have to just err on the side of caution and just be like, oh, well, like the idea that no one would say that, or that, yeah, I mean, that there's no due process or no presumption of anything. And these people obviously some people knew you, but it seems like it's some of the outside influences that were causing all the problems. But yeah, no, it's really the pure, I don't even know what to call it, the purity politics, the identity politics, the woke, the whatever, but it's very, it's far from progressive.
No, it's a whole generation of people who've been sort of convinced that attacking individuals in your own right, in your own ranks, is a form of activism, and for many of them, that's their only form of activism. And I've sort of watched it develop. I mean, the very first time I was aware, for example, of the idea that you would call somebody out, we understood it to be like a conversation that you would have, like a respectful conversation that you would have with somebody, and that you would learn from, and that you would both learn from being part of the struggle, being with each other, and maybe like, hey, mate, that was like a tiny bit racist. Have you considered this and that? And then, but there'd be an expectation that you'd continue to work together afterwards. It was something like, oh, we're in the struggle together and we're learning from each other. And it's just like over the years, just like absolutely soured to this kind of nonsense where anybody can get anybody else chucked out of a group by like.
Well, exactly, this idea that your first move is to file an official complaint or post something online. It's like, yeah, I don't, it's a serious issue. And then I don't know, people, I don't know what, because it seems like your situation, well, obviously Living Rent is the only organization that you've been a part of. But it just, I don't know, there just seems to be almost like an infiltration, or there's certain people who get in there, and then all of a sudden everything has to be connected to whatever their niche or identity focuses. So then you have like, well, people are like, well, what? No matter what it is, like, well, don't forget about our blah 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 blah, and you're just like, okay,
And I mean,
does this really have, like you said, does this have anything to do with it? And then if you don't want to do that, or if you don't want to have the pronoun ritual or something, then all of a sudden it's a whole issue, and then you waste all this time talking about that, and then you're getting further and further. I'm sure your numbers are dwindling.
For sure. There's only so many people who will put up with that. But I mean, again, I remember like, I mean, this is like going back to like the 2000s, which is the first time I sort of came across like that kind of politics, and in a much milder form. But I understood it to be something like that kind of like sense that like, oh, all white people are a bit racist because we grew up in a racist society, or everybody's got their like assumptions they need to challenge and all of that. That was like obviously like a bit of a sort of emotionally kind of consuming,
Yeah.
time-consuming process to be in.
Mhm.
And the first time it was sort of brought up and I was aware of it, I absolutely understood that to be a side project for very committed activists
Mhm.
who were already doing something serious and practical, and perhaps you
Mhm.
would do some like, you know, reflective work on
Oh my
yourself
God, yeah.
in order to make yourself more
Mhm.
effective
Mhm.
for your day job, right? That's what I
Yeah.
imagined it was for. Not
Mhm.
for like, not for making that like your only activism and using it to destroy movements, you know?
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
also I never anticipated that it would be that there'd be a sense that you had to be perfect or ready to gain entry. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? Just like, you know,
Well, yeah, at least have the I guess have the right lingo and the right
yeah,
cues or whatnot. I don't
yeah.
know. I mean, I'm kind of I don't know because I also went through university and all that, and so I'm kind of I don't know if it's the thing that a lot of people maybe if they're from middle or middle to upper class backgrounds and they go to school and they start hearing about all these terrible things that white people and other people have done, and then I don't know if they take on this like not on my watch, but for some reason it turns into policing people's language and internal life. Like it's like no matter what you do, you're guilty, and it's like before we do anything, let's make sure we all check our privilege and acknowledge our privilege and this, and it was like what? I mean, yeah. I mean, it's just and it's yeah. I agree that it's kind of like again, if housing is the focus, or if wages are the focus, or
Mm.
whatever is going on, it's like what does this have to do with anything?
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, the language police, the hall monitors, everyone with the stick up their ass and
Mm.
wants to police everybody's language and thoughts, and they want to micromanage, I think, exchanges. And most of these people who, at least that my experience with them, it's also superficial and yuck. It's like, how would you ever interact with somebody like that?
No,
It's like
no.
I grew up in an all white town. But I've been out in the world and I've interacted with all kinds of people, and I'm sure, like,
Yeah.
it's like you say it's like if because you can get a sense if somebody is coming from a decent place or not. So if they
Mhm,
say
mhm.
something or do something, you're not going to be like, and it's like, but to
Mm.
have some sort of weird, like, right fragility, race managed interaction with
Yeah,
somebody.
no, it's the Robin DiAngelo thing where she
Oh
like
my
teaches you
God. I mean, I'm just like, I
how to
can't
apologize
imagine.
to people
And it's like, who
in
is
a
this for? I'm
convoluted and
always,
unnatural way for like very
yeah,
small
yeah, yeah.
microaggressions. Yeah,
So the
imagine being
first
on
thing you
the
want to do
receiving
is
end
you
of an
always want to
apology
be
like that. It'd
sure
be
to give
awful.
them I'm like, my God, yeah.
Uh,
But the idea that this is so important and that they're so, I don't know, on this
it,
hyper
I,
sanitized, weird, non-contact. I don't
I
know.
have theories about this. Go on,
Sorry,
you go.
no,
You've
go
not
on,
said.
go on, Ellen.
Okay, I have theories about this
Please
actually.
tell
This is
me.
like okay. Um, so, so this was told to me by the race relations officer of the TUC, like a black guy, obviously, called Will Sullivan. And I was a bit of a mad lefty at the time, and I was like, "Oh, he said something a bit spicy." But he was like, "Oh, well, the middle classes like started to appropriate working class struggle like very early. You know, at the point
Mhm,
where Marx said that you need the intellectuals. The intellectuals are like essential to the struggle, and they've been like appropriating like ever since. I considered myself a Marxist. I was like, oh my gosh, what have you just said? But like, but I think it's like I think it's a version of that, isn't it? It's
mhm,
like they can't accept like because working class communities tend to be more racially mixed.
mhm,
That's the case, and I think they can't really accept middle class people, white people can't accept not being the authority on something, right? So it can't be the case that you just naturally get to learn to get on with each other through working and living together and it's a natural
mhm,
process. It
mhm,
has to be complicated in some way, doesn't it? There has to
mhm,
be a set of rules that they
mhm,
can teach you, and
mhm,
and then like we'll never get on unless you submit
mhm,
to my
mhm,
specialized knowledge. And like obviously in real life that doesn't play out very well because
mhm.
then you get a lot of people
People
who
don't
are
want
like,
to live inside HR. No.
people don't want their lives to be like
God.
HR. Of course not. Of course not. And if anything, it's the
Ah,
perfect a bit awkward with each other.
My dream is for everything to be a sensitivity training.
Yeah, God,
Oh my God.
well, yeah, imagine. Well, that is their ideal because then they get to be in charge of how everyone's interacting with them.
Let's
They're
hope
the
the
ones
rubes
that know
understand.
how
Yeah.
to do it. Yeah,
No, and I think also, but
oh,
with the Marxist thing, I think that with the ABCs, anything but class, that when I don't know from the
Yeah.
80s onwards, that became kind of pushed out. Then everything became, you had these niche specialties, whether it be race, focusing on race, or focusing on
Yeah.
well, first it was sex, and it was gender, ethnicity, all this stuff, and then this kind of somehow thinking that, well, it was always, and I think it's still maybe like, oh, and it seems like they're going after monsters that have already been slain significantly,
Well,
so
of course,
these
if
people
you go
come out
after
of
a monster
their
that hasn't been slain,
program.
there's some
Yeah,
personal
go ahead, sorry,
difficulties
go ahead.
for you involved.
Yeah.
Why would you? Why would you be the person in the room saying something, unpopular, arguing for a position where most people are against you? Why not pick something where there's more or less consensus and like make out that you're the authority on it? Like, why? How much easier is that? Your
No,
goal
but
is just
sometimes I wonder if these people, because especially coming from the states, and that some listen to some of these anti-racist professionals, and it's like they think that everything is stuck in like the 1920s or something. It's like, I not that there aren't people who have, who, and also when they want to get into your brain, like they're so positive that everybody's walking around these raging racists in their heads. I was like, but, and I'm sure you also know that, like, that I mean, one of the things that breaks down ice, whatever the racial group, is being able to joke around with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
no, I hope this burns out at some point. I don't know, maybe if the PMC is, but we always hear this stuff. It's like, like like imperial West, like, the US empire is crumbling, or or the PMC is running out of steam, and then somehow it's like there's this rejuvenation. We hear about the World Health Program master domination plan for the next illness or something. Just like, oh my God. But yeah, crazy. So how so was this contained to within Living Rent, or did this affect other organizations and other groups you guys were a part of? Did you become like, radioactive or tainted individuals or something because of this?
Yeah, and it's always hard to know when you're out there campaigning in the last 2 years or whatever. You're constantly trying stuff and doing this action and writing to these people and trying to get these people involved or have a meeting, and you never know what's going to be effective or what's going to be successful. But also, it doesn't help when you also don't know, is it because I'm a Terf? Is that why they didn't come? Is that why they don't want to talk to me? Is that what, you've got this extra layer of.
You were banned from a student occupation for
Oh
Gaza,
yeah,
weren't you?
yeah.
Do
We
you
went.
remember?
We went for it. Although I strongly suspect that was Leon that told them who we were. Me and Nick got banned from the Glasgow University occupation against the Gaza. Like, this happened back in November. December.
Yeah.
Oh, this year, okay.
Yeah, so we just went down to say, oh, good for you. And I occupied the same building when I was a student, and he spent time in Gaza, so we just went to like give them a bit of support. And the next thing we'd heard that our names were up beside the door, Nick and Laura Weinfurt, with a big cross through it. Don't let these people in.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Oh.
Huge loss for you.
Oh.
Well, they all
hang around
canceled.
what was it, a library building on the university?
It
was
That's so crazy.
But they all tore each other apart and cancelled each other within 2 weeks, so their occupation fell apart. They kept kicking each other out for not being, whatever. But
too many people got dunked in the pool, and they didn't float, so they had to. Only someone who's not a Terf is hard as light as a feather. And
I don't know about you, but
can I just go back a bit to all this, all about class stuff, and this is kind of like maybe how it relates a bit to the rest of there's the like activisty left, obviously, that wants to look super radical and stuff, but also there's the sector in which they all want to get jobs, really, at the end of the day, in their 30s or whatever. They're all going to want to be working in these NGOs or in the unions or in a charity or one of these many Quango think tank
Mm.
outfits that you know the ones I mean, that they organize
Yeah,
conferences
they're
and
they're they're in
events
the
and they
business of
meet and they
keeping
have
the
meetings
problem
and they talk.
they're in the business
Oh,
of keeping the problem they're organized around unsolved.
yes. I've heard it called Committee Scotland,
Mm.
and it's a particular problem in Scotland, and I think it is because we're quite a small country
Mm.
that the government will set up and fund these like little organisations that will do some charity work and some campaigning work, and
Mm.
then they will go and seek opinions and from those organisations that they're already funding. They'll do a sort of consultation and they'll consult the people that they funded and set up, and it's a big gravy train for
Yeah.
everybody
And the
involved.
SNP massively expanded that kind of stuff as
Yeah,
well.
they
Like
did.
they'd spend
So
like
basically,
big
it's just
chunks
another
more.
form of political patronage then that
Yeah.
It
happens.
is. It's a form of political patronage for the Liberal left.
But you
And
can imagine how in that kind of culture, you know, everybody ends up sort of having a similar mindset and people's mates are working in similar organizations,
Well, and
etc.
their income comes from the same source. So yeah, you don't
Mm.
want to. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
I mean, the flack is real. So it's like, okay, if we just all kind of go along with this, and
Yeah.
And the
you don't
first
have
thing to
to, but you
go, and
shouldn't
the
say
first
anything about
thing,
it.
yeah, and the first thing to go is their radical theory and practice. So they go from being, I'm an activist, me, I'm so angry about everything in the world, to posting about, say, Gaza or how Trump shouldn't win the election or whatever. But then in terms of their actual practice and the work that they're doing, it very not radical, very don't rock the boat, don't criticize, don't, no one
Yeah.
criticize each other, everybody make each other look good all the
Well,
time,
yeah,
blah, blah, blah.
they get professionalized, and you get part of
Yeah,
that
yeah,
culture,
and you
and
end up
then
with the
yeah,
ABC politics
yeah,
is locked into all of that.
mm,
And it's part of the reason I think that, for example, in Living Rent, there were some causes that were trendier than others. So, for example, it never seems to work for sexism. I mean, obviously, there's like a few very high profile examples of people being kicked out of organizations for sexism or organizations breaking apart. Usually takes something pretty extreme for that to happen. Doesn't usually come about as a result of somebody using a misogynistic term in an email or something. But certainly that never seems to be like the word. How many times I was called a cunt and you were called a cunt and everyone was called a cunt. And we went through various grievance meetings with Living Rent, sent various emails. At no point could I get anyone from that organization to agree that it was inappropriate to call women a cunt in a professional setting.
I believe that they had some kind of like internal discussions on it, and they were convinced that.
Those must have. It'd be great to see meetings, the minutes of those meetings.
They did try to pull that one. They tried to say it's Glasgow.
Yeah.
People
That's
call
just
each
how
other
people talk.
not people with your accents. They don't.
No, for you that's a new thing.
Yeah. No, I mean with these posh English people living in Edinburgh telling me that I should accept being called a cunt by a non-binary guy. But then I get told off repeatedly for referring to him as him in my meeting, this guy that doesn't exist. Because Brian is non-binary. And then they couldn't even keep to it themselves.
They couldn't present Brian. How do we know?
Over themselves calling him he, because it's impossible. But the point is, when Sarah Finley said how all of this crap had made her feel and what her lived experience of it was, given the experiences that she'd had in her life, which is that she had a very years and years long violently abusive relationship with a guy that eventually went away for beating her up. And that she said that the way that she was bullied and the ongoing nature of it, because she was getting all these private messages calling her a Terf piece of shit from random members of the organization, and her son getting freaked out, her teenage son worrying for his safety. She told them, look, this is how my ex-husband used to make me feel. Nothing. It just meant nothing to them.
Mean anything
There was no sign of like, oh, we're sorry that has happened to you. Yeah, we can understand how that might, be the case for you. Absolutely nothing.
No,
but can I just end on this one point? Sorry, it's just that, like women are trendy. Okay, so asylum seekers trendy. It's a luxury belief in a way, isn't it? Because you can be one of those people that's like, oh, I love asylum seekers, me. And then the underlying thing with that is like, you think you deserve some kind of medal for that, really. You fancy yourself as very different to the rest of these plebs who obviously are all kind of racist under the surface. You're different to them because you think asylum seekers aren't necessarily a bad thing. And then there's the trans thing. Oh, it's very trendy. Women, really not so trendy at all. Like, you
No,
know,
no,
and
we're old
and
school.
again, disabled people.
we're
Seriously,
we're the OG.
thing.
I mean,
It's a class thing.
historically, not saying
In
it,
the
and every time
circles,
period. Yeah.
yeah, in the circles that these people move in, and because you're talking generally people in their 20s, for them, given that they are quite middle class, educated, and all the rest of it, for them, it's like gender, as in the version, the meaning of gender that we understand it, isn't going to be a factor until they get to the point where they're having babies and stuff. You know, so for them, it's not a thing. They cannot identify and they cannot um, uh, empathize with a woman who is facing the kind of stuff that women would be facing in hotels, with a woman who might end up having to exchange sex for a place to live, the woman who has children who are traumatized and stuck in, you know, temporary accommodation, that has to flee an abusive situation and has nowhere to go. They don't feel their pain in the same way that they would feel the pain of a middle class non-binary person whose pronouns have been denied them. Do you
Oh my
see what I'm
God.
saying? That
Yeah.
person's pain hits them right here, like, oh, I get that. But the
I
women
wonder if it really
dying
does.
in
No,
fucking
no, no. Or
hotels
they
with their
just have
children, not
friends
so
who
much.
are. I don't know. Yeah. I get your
But
point. I get
sorry,
I get
can
your point. I
I
get your
just get
point.
to
Yeah.
well, no, my point I wanted to end on was that last night, like, I watched this expose on STV about the homelessness crisis, and they interviewed a bunch of women who had been stuck in temporary accommodation. So they interviewed one woman who'd been stuck with her children for 18 months and who's saying, like, you know, this is a hellish nightmare. Another woman who's saying that her daughter's like personality is completely changed after all this time she spent in the hotels. Another woman saying that she considered leaving the hotel accommodation because it was so awful and going back to her husband that had been beating her up. And after they showed all these interviews, they had a mini interview with the woman who runs Women's Aid in Scotland. And what does she choose to talk about after watching those interviews? She goes, yes, talks kind of vaguely about poverty. Poverty is a big. You could tell that she was an SNP supporter from what she chose to talk about. Poverty, i.e., it's Westminster's fault for cutting the capital spend. It's Westminster's fault for cutting the spending budget. Our government's lovely and is doing everything they possibly can. Then she talked about how poverty is a driver, and she talked about the particular difficulties facing asylum-seeking women, but that she was following this up from 3 interviews from women who were in this temporary accommodation, and she didn't mention the situation in temporary accommodation because she's in that bubble. She's
Yeah,
in that NGO
they
bubble.
must all get their
There are
talking
certain
points, and then
topics that
they.
you bring
Yeah.
up, that you talk about,
Yeah.
and women just
Just
don't
not
cut
in
it.
it.
So she's a woman who obviously cares
Yeah.
about women.
But
She
then that-
spends her life
yeah.
working to try and improve their lives, but it's
Yeah.
not reached her.
Yeah.
The information that these women are dying and being trafficked in hotels somehow hasn't permeated into those circles.
Yeah, because they're not experiencing just like generic poverty, are they? They're experiencing poverty as women in the way that women experience it, and it's crazy that you couldn't make that connection in your head after watching that and make a human connection and say human thing. You have to like go back to your like list of talking points
Yeah.
and say the thing that you'd prepared. It's not good.
And it's the same with living rent. So we got told again, part of the reason that we have to have a zero tolerance policy on these horrible transphobes is because trans people are disproportionately affected by the housing and homelessness crisis.
No,
Like shit.
No.
Rent.
No,
Women
they're not.
are.
Yeah, we know this. We know
Women are.
this from because once people got a few brave people or whoever looked into this, you're like, wait, these people are just pulling this out. They're just assuming.
Yeah, no, they are just.
And it's like,
assuming.
no, it's we now know that at least in the UK and in the US and other comparable countries, that is not the case, especially if you control for high risk factors.
Yeah, I mean,
You know,
if you look at the
so yeah,
statistics,
it's just like, no, it's nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just so. And I also think sometimes that they get a lot of bang for their buck, because you said it was trendy, and so also it's a small population actually.
Mm.
who would be in this case. So if they're focusing on that group, they can actually do a couple of things, be like, oh, look what we've done. Whereas you're looking at a broader population, it takes more money, and maybe you don't have I don't know, they're going for the splash or something. But there's just I see your posts, Laura, all the time, and I know that you're constantly trying to get people to acknowledge the situation that these women are facing. And yeah, and it just seems so crazy, especially when it's something that seems like just practically shouldn't be that difficult to resolve, but for some reason just doesn't get anywhere. I mean, I can imagine, especially because you have face-to-face contact with some of these women and their children, that it must really piss you off to be gaslit. Yeah. Anyway, Dr. Peter ISP, what did he say? Any party in power attracts career people who in essence have no principles. Parties should be on the lookout. Purge them. Purge.
No
Explains a lot about the SNP. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you gotta be careful. I mean, I think, sometimes some people need to be purged. But purging over acknowledging biology, yeah. Or bringing up things that have nothing to do with anything. Yeah.
It's hard. It is hard to know what the way forward is. You feel like if we had robust systems of governance within Living Rent, if there had been even a grievance procedure.
Oh,
I mean, no, because I know.
Because I was on
no, but it's stupid because, like, not that unless you've
told I wrote those policies and they did nothing. I thought I was like really clever. I was sat there on the board saying, "Hey guys, let's make it all consistent with the equalities legislation, the human rights law, and you can't do this and you have to do that." And then when they decided to purge it, all went out of the window. They did not follow that. Like it was an absolute waste of time having sat down and written it with people who then turned around and purged me.
Yeah, they decided at some point that you guys would be where it was fine to sacrifice you, which is stupid. I mean, because they saw they were freaked out by who was coming at them, but also it's stupid because clearly they lost at least 4 or 5, 6 people who were quite dedicated and had lots of experience and trust in the community, and they purge you guys. It's stupid.
How many hours were we putting in, like when we were working for Living Rent? How many hours were we putting in a week between us? Like, it's crazy to think about, actually.
Well, yeah. Although I did look at Living Rent because I wanted to see what I don't know this. I don't know if when they put this in, but they had the one thing, because I was like, why? Because when I was reading about this organization, I was like, well, how would the trans stuff even come up? And then I saw they had this little thing on discrimination. Communities and a housing system which reinforces equality rather than reproduces inequality, fostering networks of compassion, care, and solidarity. Yes. We seek to remove the barriers caused by ableism, racism, transphobia, xenophobia, sexism, classism, not class, but classism. Class is an identity now. And all forms of discrimination within Living Rent. All forms of discrimination within Living Rent, the housing system, and society as a whole. Well, good luck with that.
Oh my God.
We are going to fight all of these things at the same time, baby.
Well, you can't solve anything until you've solved everything altogether. So that will prevent you from ever moving forward.
They've checked all the boxes.
All the boxes. Like the classism one is such a laugh though, because they I've always expected working class members to behave exactly like middle class members. They've always been like very confused that schemies are not rushing to join Slack and spend all of their time chatting to people they don't have much in common with on Slack. They've never done. They've barely made a move to be even slightly like accommodating.
And look what happened to us, Tara, last week, just trying to do this podcast. Like, you need a pretty good laptop / enough data to be able to join
Yeah, I know,
Zoom
and you never
meetings.
know, because even right now, my little thing, I have a little thing that's the when my internet, if it gets the signal gets low, I get this little scary warning, and I'm like, what the hell? I'm supposed to have good internet.
Yeah,
So now I'm like crossing my fingers, like tonight it'll be my
yeah.
or maybe all my kids are. I don't know. Good. But yeah, no. I mean, this is the thing is you don't. Yeah, it might not work, and if you're trying to make it work, and then it's frustrating, and then and then yeah. So yeah, no, yeah, it's all. I mean, we've all had this experience, and particularly the universities that I've worked at. If you were to take the literature, how they see themselves seriously, you're like, this is because they make it seem like everybody's for you, and we're all about the staff and the students, and there's this support and this and this and that, and you're like,
Yeah.
am I the only one that doesn't?
But you know what
I
do you know
don't.
what the
I'm not
upside?
feeling that way. What's
Yeah.
what's happening? Or you try to find out, and it's just like, so I think there seem to be a lot, like there's a lot of communication within these things about what I don't know, but it just seems like it's almost yeah, counterproductive. So, and then I think that's how you get things like this, that it's like, because if you're like, okay, union fighting for a society bill was about housing, and then now it's everything. So we're going to remove barriers by ableism, racism, transphobia, xenophobia, sexism, classism, and all forms of discrimination within living rent, the housing system, and society as a whole. What?
I mean, that's probably that probably says something about like how they go about. A lot of people go about activism, because the only way in which you can cover all of those things as one individual is just to make posts on social media. You can, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You clearly
To
can't
mention it,
dedicate your life to all of that, could you? Even if you
well,
had
or
nothing else
you
on.
become hyper vigilant. I think and you mentioned this before. You become hyper vigilant about your own organization and the people around you. So the best thing you can do is just kind of make sure that nobody has a whiff of any kind of impropriety. It's also like people are human. Can you imagine? It's like they want everybody to be, I don't know, some sort of sanitized HR something,
But
HR bot.
yeah. But on that, I think what the upside of all this has been, and what we've kind of told
Yeah,
ourselves,
how about housing people instead?
Yeah,
There you
well,
go,
this
Keith.
is what I'm trying to say.
That's what they purged the people that were successful.
Well, this is it. You can let yourself be purged and roll over, or you can do what we did and pick yourselves up and keep campaigning. In fact, we campaigned twice as hard because of what had happened to us, and because we're on our own now, and so it's us against the Wheatley group kind of thing. But then we did find support in unexpected places. When I say unexpected, I'm talking about the leftiest of the left, the eco people, the communists. They came to our aid, and they've done loads with us. A whole bunch of lovely middle class architects that want to see these buildings retrofitted came and did a ton of work, having exhibitions and producing research papers. We had Scotland's leading architects came and wrote a whole paper on how this could be done. Experts in carbon and VAT joining it. But all these people came to our aid.
Salmon came.
Oh, then after, much later, we had the Alex.
Yeah.
Are you
Salmon
sure none of them have ever been ableist?
Well, this is the thing.
I mean,
What happened to us?
I mean, look at those architects'
cancelled?
buildings. Are there enough ramps? I want to know.
Lifts. It's fine.
They're bipodal centric or privileged. They're something.
But listen, being cancelled by the woke Scottish left, insofar as it is the left, and then it's actually doing stuff. There are pockets of activity, obviously, but on the whole, there's a lot of navel gazing and not a lot of action. Being cancelled could have been the best thing that happened to us. Because what it does is it immunizes you against being stuck in organizations with these middle class wankers. You're not
Mhm.
trendy to them anymore. Brilliant. They're not going to join you, and you're not going to have to worry about the next
Deal
time
with
they
it,
decide
yeah,
to
yeah.
cancel you or throw a scrap about something
Mhm,
that has completely no bearing
Yeah.
on
mhm,
anything. The other thing is
mhm.
we don't get any funding from the Scottish Tennis Organisation or in the Wynford Dresses. The only money that we get is from our membership, and it exclusively goes on room rental and occasionally penting to
Printing.
print things.
Yeah.
But again, every organisation that I've seen that has got funding has ended up going down that same, what did you call it? The Scotland Committee.
Committee Scotland.
That
Scotland,
has ended up taking the same form.
Mm.
So maybe that
They
not
end up
having any money and not
cannibalizing
having any
themselves, yeah.
popularity means you
Mhm,
just get on with doing the activism that you were
mhm,
there to do in the first place.
mhm. Yeah, and the harder stuff. I mean, I think that, the ABC thing is also good because it's just like, even though not that it's pleasant if you're the one who's being targeted, so people can feel good that they're, rooting out, or even who knows. I mean, it seems like also people were using that for cynical reasons against you guys. But the Wheatleys of the world, and the higher up the political and economic structure, they're fine with, you can be as woke and as about into identity politics as you want to be. That's
Mhm.
great. They'll support you in that.
Yeah, well,
Lots of
it's
money
also
and career
true.
pathways, and
Yeah.
at least there used to be. Maybe the DEI is coming to a close. It'll be rebirthed as something else. Who knows? But that's, yeah, no, for sure. I mean, you obviously, you guys did not let it
Yeah,
keep you
I'm
out,
still
keep you
here.
down out of it.
Still
Too
doing
bad.
And we're
stuff.
not better at all.
But the Wheatleys are like, yeah. I bet the Wheatleys are like, God damn it!
Well,
Why
look,
can't we? Why can't we get these people?
in all fairness, if I was a private tenant and I wanted some help to
No, you wouldn't.
get
No,
my
you
deposit
wouldn't.
back,
You wouldn't.
well, no, they wouldn't help me. But if I
Mhm.
was someone else, that they would help.
I actually no, I don't
and I
think I
wanted
would at
help to
this
get my
point.
deposit back, they would be helpful.
I would have said that 2 years ago, but
Yeah.
they're increasingly irrelevant.
Yeah.
All they've done in the last 2 years is act as a Green Party mouthpiece and push this useless housing bill that is going to
It is a
solve
useless
absolutely
housing
nothing.
bill. Yeah.
So they become
And
more
then
of a
comment on
lobbying
other
group,
things. They
is what
don't
you're
even.
saying.
As far as I know, they still have 16 paid members of staff.
It's a lot considering the
They
membership.
don't do any activism, so I don't really know what they're doing.
Hmm.
Sometimes they get invited to comment on stuff in the press or along to meetings, but
Well, they're
doesn't
probably
seem like
going to a
there's
lot of
much.
meetings and seminars about how to, be
I guess.
inclusive and.
One of them lived in a shed in an allotment for a while, and they made a film about it, and then they had a
Oh, well,
film
there you
night showing the
go.
film. So
Were
that
they
was
trying
helpful.
to? Okay. Were they trying to
Shit, why
experience
didn't we do that?
Why didn't we think
housing
of
precarity?
That's clearly where it's at.
I'm gonna start feeling myself going to the grocery store and my surprised reactions when I'm like, why
Oh,
is
do you know the
yogurt
elf?
why is every time I go to buy the yogurt, why is it more expensive? Just
Oh,
like,
I know.
I'm thinking, like, a few years ago this yogurt was like 110 and now it's like almost 3 pounds. I'm like,
Or a
what?
few days ago, like it was
Yeah.
half the price. Yeah.
So my
We
my
had
my
one
daughter's like,
great
oh, can we get some mangoes? And I'm like, mangoes?
yeah.
outrageous?
No.
Never.
What has kind of happened since we left Living Rent was that there are other people who join it because they genuinely care about housing, and it seems like there's a housing thing that's around, so that's why they join. So there's members, we know people. There are people who are in the STO who are also members of Living Rent.
Yeah.
Um,
If Living Rent's more active where they are, then it makes sense.
it won't be. Anyway, sorry.
It was like briefly.
It was
in
for a
Castleville,
while, yeah.
But yeah, that doesn't
But
seem to be
a lot of
working for
these
them.
people are people that very much see the problems in Living Rent, and they're trying to drag it more to the left and more to have a radical position and do more activism. But what's funny is for a while some of those people were reporting back to us and letting us know some of the nonsense that was going on. And there was one person that had to get called up. When was it? A few months back, for doing door knocking in a scheme while wearing elf ears. Do you know those little pointy elf
Oh,
ears?
yeah.
So they had to be basically asked by one of the organizers, could you not wear the elf ears when you're going and visiting people? It just doesn't look that professional, you know.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, like, who is this gonna be?
You need to be told, like, maybe keep your elf ears for after work, like
Yeah.
Christmas.
That seems reasonable. Though. I'd have to say that seems kind of reasonable. Although I don't know if the person was doing it for free. It's like, well, but if they're being paid, then yeah, you need the elf ears.
We had a good
But
chuckle
hey,
about
you
that.
know, if
I mean,
people
it could
with
be a
if
conversation
people,
starter,
but you know, if people can, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like, but then it seems odd. It's like what you can have special pronouns, but not special ears.
yeah.
Where do you draw the
I mean,
line?
you know,
Elf
that doesn't seem
ID.
fair. I
Mm.
really feel that's my authentic self
Oh.
is Elven or
Oh.
Vulcan. I'm not very Vulcan though. Although I like Spock. Anyway, that's a digression. Anyway, ladies, we've been talking for an hour and 20 minutes. How are we doing? Do you feel like we can get into the Scottish independence, or do you feel like we should?
I feel I'm flagging. I've been up
me too.
uncharacteristically early the last week because I've been ferrying a teenager to school and I'm not coping with it very well.
Ah, that's fine.
You going?
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much. If there's anything, yeah, so we've been talking about Laura and Eleanor, and Eleanor's husband and a couple of others were forced out of living rent, and it seemed to be a coordinated effort using on the pretense that they were transphobic and terrible Terfs, and they were harassed and all kinds of crap, and eventually were pushed out of or left living rent, but they stayed true to course. They're still involved in advocating for social housing and tenants' rights and homelessness and all that type of stuff without all the crazy boxes. Fit, whatever. So their testament, ladies, you're bosses in the best possible way.
So are you.
Oh well,
A good word,
fine.
girl.
I wish like I'm like I want to be up and work with Laura and Eleanor.
Come and see
Anyway.
us.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Come
on
on.
a Scottish
To the
tour.
Weinford. Come and check us out.
Oh
We'll show you
yeah.
around.
Cool. How old are your kids? Oh no, don't tell me. Let's not talk about our kids online. Never mind. Because I was gonna say I can bring my brood or what? Maybe just me. That's fun or more fun. I don't know.
I'll bring the brood. Yeah, bring the brood. We've got plenty
All
of
right.
space.
Anyway, Laura, Eleanor, thank you very much, and I look forward to the
Thank
next time
you.
we can. Next time we are all together. All right, and
Awesome.
say like screw Wheatley, screw Wheatley Group, screw Living Rent. Unless they get their act together, you gotta check off. You gotta, let's focus, people. Let's prioritize. All right, see you next time.
See you soon, Tara.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. All right, so those lovely Eleanor and Laura talking about the time they were their experience being pushed out of living rent in Scotland, and people were using the excuse that they were Terfs, transphobes, whatever, to get them out of the organization. And they're skeptical. They're suspicious that it wasn't just members of Living Rent that were involved, but also people from Wheatley Group and others who were interested in private housing development and might have had would have had a vested interest in getting effective community organizers out of the way. Anyway, thank you very much for tuning in. Tomorrow I will be on, is it 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock? 8 o'clock UK time with Garrett, who's going to join me. We're going to do a review of US politics, our US 2024 election, Game of Thrones coverage, see what the crazy things that are going on in the Trump versus Harris election that seems to be about nothing and everything at the same time. Anyway, please do like or subscribe. And also at the end, I'll run the credits and you can see the links to YouTube, our YouTube channel, Rumble, also the Substack, Patreon, and all that good stuff. Please do like, subscribe, and share if you like this content. And I look forward to seeing you next time.